The scream echoed across the store. It wasn't just a cry of fear. It was the desperate plea of a puppy trapped inside a vending machine, a glass box that had never been meant to contain life. The store manager, arms crossed, stood just beyond. The crowd, his face frozen in a look of indifference. A small group of bystanders had gathered around, phones raised to film the scene, murmuring in disbelief. But no one moved. No one stepped forward to do anything. They simply stared. Except for one woman, quiet, unseen, and still, standing slightly apart from the group. Her eyes flickered to the puppy shaking, trembling, desperately trying to find its way out, and something in her chest tightened. "I can't just watch," she whispered, barely audible over the puppy's cries. She made her way through. The crowd, her purpose clear. The puppy, barely a few months old, was trapped behind the glass walls of a vending machine. The machine, designed to house snacks and drinks, had become a tomb for an innocent creature. It was clear that the puppy had been placed there by someone as a prank or a careless mistake, but now that it was there, no one knew what to do. Some people filmed, others whispered. A couple of parents tried to comfort their children, shielding them from the noise and distress. But for most of them, the puppy's misery was just another inconvenience in a busy day. They were ready to move on. Then there was her, the woman standing quietly at the back of the crowd. Her clothes were plain, her demeanor unremarkable. Yet something about the scene called to her. Her eyes, dark and determined, fixed on the machine with an intensity that no one else seemed to have. Her heart raced as she watched the puppy writhe against the glass. She could feel its fear, its confusion, the pain that came with being trapped, with having no way out. It was as though the cries of the puppy were an echo of her own past struggles, times when she, too, had been trapped, misunderstood, or silenced. "Don't get involved," her mind warned her. "It's not your problem." But her feet didn't move. She remained rooted to the spot, watching. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. Her hands tightened into fists. How could she not act? This wasn't just a puppy in a machine. This was a creature in distress. This was an injustice happening right in front of her eyes, and if she didn't step forward, she would never forgive herself. But what if she couldn't fix it? What if her actions only made things worse? What if, by trying to save the puppy, she became the target of everyone's anger, their judgment? Her mind raced with all the what-ifs, but deep down there was a calm understanding. This moment, this struggle, was a test. The puppy, trapped in a glass cage, was no different than she had been in her life. Stuck, misunderstood, shamed. Her resolve hardened. This was her fight. As the woman stepped toward the vending machine, she could feel the eyes of the crowd shift toward her. But it wasn't just the crowd that noticed. The store manager, tall and imposing, moved toward her with slow, deliberate steps. His hands were in his pockets, a disinterested smirk playing at the corners of his lips. He'd seen these things before: drama, chaos, people who couldn't mind their own business. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he called out, his voice thick with authority. The woman stopped, her heart pounding in her chest, but she didn't turn around. She had already made her decision. "You're going to break the machine," he warned, his tone dismissive. "There's nothing we can do. Just let it be." The crowd murmured behind her, some agreeing, some questioning. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She could feel his judgment. He wasn't offering solutions, he was offering excuses. "You can't just stand there doing nothing," she said, turning to face him. Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet anger underneath. The manager's smirk faded. "It's not your problem. You're just going to make things worse." He gestured to the crowd as though to say, "Why bother?" But she wasn't going to be silenced. She wasn't going to walk away. Not this time. The puppy let out another terrified scream. It's small. Body trembling against the glass. It wasn't just afraid. It was panicked, desperate to escape the confines of the vending machine. Its cries were muffled by the thick glass, but they were still loud enough to shake everyone who heard them. The woman stepped closer, her hand reaching toward the machine. But as she did, the puppy yelped again, a high-pitched, soul-wrenching cry that made everyone stop and watch. It was the kind of sound that you couldn't ignore, a sound that screamed for help. The crowd stiffened, some instinctively taking a step back. No one knew what to do. No one knew how to help. The store manager stood just a few feet away, arms crossed tightly against his chest. "I'm telling you, there's nothing to be done," he repeated, his voice growing sharper, more impatient. But the woman wasn't listening anymore. She was too focused on the puppy, her heart breaking at the sound of its cries. She could see the fear in its eyes, the way it clawed at the glass, desperate for a way out. This wasn't just a puppy anymore, she realized. This was a call for justice. With a deep breath, she steadied herself. There was no going back now. The crowd stood still, waiting, watching, some holding their breath in anticipation of what might come next. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. The puppy's cries were no longer distant. They were sharp, cutting into her like a warning. "Someone has to do something," she muttered under her breath, her hands now trembling. Her eyes darted around the store. Most people had turned back to their shopping, either ignoring the scene or simply too uncomfortable to act. But not her. She couldn't walk away. She reached up to the glass, pressing her palm gently against it, her eyes never leaving the puppy's pleading face. "It's okay," she thought. "You're not alone anymore." Her fingers grazed the edges of the vending machine, but as she tried to pull the door open, it wouldn't budge. The lock was firmly in place, and the glass was solid, unyielding. The puppy's cries echoed louder now, urgent and frantic. Its small paws pressed against the glass, looking for a way out, desperate. But there was no way out, not unless someone figured out how to unlock it. The woman looked around. There was no key, no obvious way to release the lock. She tried the panel again, her frustration mounting. There has to be a way, she thought. The crowd was growing impatient. Without hesitation, she knelt down in front of the machine and pried open the small panel. Her fingers trembled, but her mind was focused. She knew exactly what she was doing. The puppy's cries grew softer now, almost as if it had realized someone was trying to help. Her heart swelled as she found the wires that controlled the lock. They were simple to access, just a matter of cutting the right wire and releasing the mechanism. A moment later, she had it. The lock gave way, and the panel door swung open with a soft click. The lock gave way, and the panel door swung open with a soft click. The manager's face turned red as the woman successfully freed the puppy. He stormed toward her, anger flashing in his eyes. "You can't just break things," he yelled. "This isn't your store. This is against store policy." The woman stood up slowly, holding the puppy close to her chest. Her fingers brushed the soft fur of its trembling body. "I didn't break anything," she said, her voice low but steady. "I fixed it." The puppy, now freed from its glass prison, looked up at her with gratitude, its tail giving a small, uncertain wag. The manager looked furious, but he couldn't argue with the results. He crossed his arms and sneered. "You're lucky the puppy's okay. That's the only thing stopping me from calling security." "Go ahead," she replied, her calm gaze meeting his, unflinching. "But I'm not leaving until this puppy is safe." The crowd around them grew quieter. Some were now watching with a mixture of awe and guilt, realizing they had done nothing while this woman had taken action. The puppy, now safe in the woman's arms, was still shivering, but no longer crying. She could feel its heart beating rapidly against her chest, its small body desperate for warmth and comfort. The woman stood there, holding it gently, as though reassuring it that everything would be okay. The crowd had fallen silent. People were starting to take a step back, their phone cameras lowered, some of them glancing at the manager with a new sense of shame. The manager, still hovering nearby, looked uncomfortable. He seemed to realize that he had lost this battle, but he wasn't about to admit it. He tried again, his voice strained. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is going to cause problems." The woman didn't respond. She simply looked down at the puppy in her arms, stroking its head, her face serene in the face of all the tension. "You did good," a soft voice came from the crowd. A man, an older gentleman, stepped forward. His hands were raised in a peaceful gesture, and he smiled at her with a look of approval. "Thank you," he said simply. The woman nodded, her heart still racing, but now filled with the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had made a difference. She turned to the puppy, her expression softening. "You're safe now." She took a deep breath, letting the relief wash over her. The manager stood motionless, his face flushed, but unable to do anything else. The crowd, once divided, now stood in silent acknowledgement. As the tension began to lift, the store manager stood still, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, clearly uncomfortable. The crowd had shifted. Their eyes, once indifferent, now observed him with judgment. He looked around, hoping someone would back him up, but no one did. People had seen what had happened. They had witnessed the real hero, the quiet woman who didn't need a title to make a difference. All right, the manager muttered, his voice tinged with embarrassment. "I guess the puppy's fine. You all can go back to your business." His words were barely audible over the soft murmurs in the crowd. The woman glanced at him, her calm eyes meeting his frantic ones. Her gaze didn't waver, didn't flinch. She wasn't here for an apology. She wasn't here for his approval. The puppy, now cradled in her arms, nuzzled closer to her chest. It was calm, its breathing steady, no longer filled with the terror it had shown moments before. The woman walked out of the store with the puppy nestled securely in her arms. Her heart was still racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from something else, something deeper. It was the kind of rush that came from doing what was right, from standing firm when everyone else had turned away. She looked down at the small, trembling creature in her arms. The puppy's eyes met hers, wide with gratitude, yet still uncertain. It had come from a place of fear of being abandoned, neglected, and trapped. But in her arms, it was finally starting to relax, starting to feel safe. For a moment, the woman closed her eyes, breathing in the fresh air. She hadn't realized how heavy the silence had been before. Now the world seemed just a little brighter, a little more hopeful. "You're safe now," she whispered to the puppy, her voice soft and reassuring. As she walked toward the door, she heard the voices behind her. At first, they were whispers, almost like an afterthought. But as she stepped closer to the exit, they grew louder. "Did you see what she did?" Someone whispered. "That woman, she didn't back down. She saved that dog." The store manager, once the figure of authority, was now nowhere to be seen. The woman had taken control of the situation without ever raising her voice. As she exited the store, a few of the crowd members watched her with a new sense of respect. Some nodded as she passed. One woman even mouthed, "Thank you." But the woman didn't stop. She didn't need validation. Her actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. The woman stepped outside, her shoes tapping lightly against the pavement. The store door closed softly behind her, and the world around her felt still for a moment, as though it too had taken a deep breath. But she wasn't thinking about the crowd anymore. She wasn't thinking about the manager's scornful glares. Her thoughts were elsewhere. In that moment, She couldn't help but think back to when she was younger, how her own family had once struggled with unseen battles, how her own mother had fought tirelessly for the dignity and respect that others so often took for granted. She had learned the power of small acts of kindness, of standing up when it felt like no one else would. Her mother had taught her that the only thing that could never be taken away from someone was their integrity. It was the same lesson she had carried with her for years. And now, with the puppy in her arms, it felt like she had completed a circula journey that had started long ago with her mother's teachings. She didn't need loud protests or public speeches. All she needed was the quiet strength to act. The sun was setting as the woman walked through the park, the puppy now securely nestled in her arms, a soft blanket over its back. The world had changed just a little bit today. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. The puppy's trust in her was enough to make every moment worth it. She sat on a park bench, letting the cool breeze run through her hair. As the puppy lay in her lap, resting peacefully, she realized that the quiet victories, those small, unnoticed moments, were the ones that truly mattered. It wasn't just about the puppy. It wasn't just about saving one life. It was about standing firm against the tide of indifference and choosing to act when others chose to walk away. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, knowing that in a world full of noise, her quiet strength had made a difference. As she gazed up at the sky, the last of the day's light faded, and she whispered softly to the puppy, "You're home now." And with that, she walked away, the world around her filled with a new sense of possibility, the puppy's tail wagging gently in the breeze.